The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, just as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds in her office. Clara stared at the screen, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribcage. The subject line read, "Immediate termination notice." She blinked once, twice, hoping it was some cruel joke or technical error. But there it was, black letters on a white background, cold and unyielding. "You have been terminated effective immediately due to budgetary constraints," the message began, each word slicing deeper into her chest than the last. Clara's hands trembled as she scrolled down to find no explanation, no apology, only a curt directive to return all company property by close of business that day. Her mind raced back to the conversation she'd had with Mr. Carter, the CEO, just 2 weeks earlier. He'd smiled warmly then, patting her shoulder after their quarterly review. "Clara, you're irreplaceable," he'd said. Irreplaceable? The irony hit her like a punch to the gut. She sat frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Around her, the office buzzed with its usual hum, the clatter of keyboards, muffled phone calls, and idle chatter about weekend plans. None of them knew yet. None of them would care when they did. At 62 years old, Clara wasn't exactly the youngest employee, but she'd poured 35 of those years into this company. 35 years of early mornings, late nights, missed family dinners, canceled vacations, all for this place. And now, without so much as a handshake or a thank you note, it was over. Her throat tightened as tears threatened to spill over. No, not here. Not now. She grabbed her coat from the back of her chair and bolted toward the elevator before anyone could see her crumble. As the door slid shut behind her, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflective surface, eyes wide with disbelief, face pale beneath streaks of mascara smudged by hurried attempts to wipe away her tears. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But reality has a way of crashing down hard when you least expect it. By the time Clara reached her car, parked in the far corner of the lot where seniority earned her prime real estate, the weight of everything pressed down on her shoulders. She slumped into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. What had she done wrong? Hadn't she always delivered? Always gone above and beyond? It wasn't until later that afternoon, sitting alone in her kitchen with an untouched cup of tea growing cold beside her, that Clara stumbled upon the truth. A former colleague, someone who still worked upstairs in HR, had texted her out of the blue. "I'm so sorry about today," the message read. "If it helps, I heard why they let you go. Insurance premiums were going up, and apparently, keeping older employees costs more. They thought cutting you would save them $750 a month." $750 a month. That was it. 3 decades of loyalty, expertise, and dedication boiled down to less than $1,000. Clara stared at the words on her phone screen, feeling something shift inside her. Anger bubbled to the surface, hot and sharp, cutting through the fog of shock and grief. How dare they? How dare they reduce her life's work to numbers on a spreadsheet? And yet, even as fury coursed through her veins, another emotion took root: determination. If they thought they could discard her like yesterday's news, they were sorely mistaken. Clara might be 62, but she wasn't done, not by a long shot. Whatever came next, whatever battle lay ahead, one thing was certain: they hadn't seen the last of her. The days that followed were a blur of restless nights and quiet mornings. Clara moved through them almost mechanically, trying to piece together how her life had unraveled so quickly. She woke up early, made coffee she didn't drink, and stared out the window at the oak tree in her backyard. Its branches swayed gently in the breeze, resilient despite decades of storms. She envied its steadfastness. Her savings weren't substantial, enough to cover basic expenses for a year, maybe 2 if she pinched every penny, but retirement hadn't been part of her plan yet. Not really. She'd imagined working until 65, perhaps even 67, building her nest egg while mentoring younger colleagues along the way. Now, those dreams felt stolen from her, snatched away without warning or regard for the person behind the paycheck. Still, Clara refused to wallow indefinitely. There was too much fight left in her bones for that. On Thursday morning, 3 days after the termination email landed in her inbox, she marched into the local library armed with a notebook and a steely resolve. Computers lined one wall, their screens glowing softly under fluorescent lights. She chose a seat near the window, opened her laptop, and got to work. First, she updated her resume, a task both painful and cathartic. Every bullet point reminded her of accomplishments she'd once taken pride in, projects she'd pour her soul into. She listed promotions, awards, successful campaigns, and leadership roles, each entry a testament to her value. When she finally saved the document, her chest swelled with a strange mix of satisfaction and indignation. Let them try to dismiss her worth now. Next came LinkedIn. Clara hadn't used the platform much before. It had always seemed unnecessary when her career trajectory was steady and secure. Now though, she needed connections, or at least visibility. She polished her profile, adding keywords and endorsements from former coworkers who eagerly vouched for her skills. Within hours, notifications began rolling in, messages of support, offers to network, even a few interview requests. Each one buoyed her spirits just a little more. Yet, amidst the flurry of activity, doubts lingered. Was anyone truly interested in hiring someone her age? Would potential employers see her gray hair and assume she was set in her ways, resistant to change? These questions gnawed at her, but she pushed them aside. She couldn't afford to dwell on what-ifs. Instead, she focused on what she could control, preparing for interviews, researching companies, and honing her pitch. One evening, as she practiced answering common interview questions in front of the mirror, her reflection caught her off guard. The woman staring back looked tired but determined, her eyes flashing with a fire Clara hadn't seen in years. For the first time since losing her job, she allowed herself to feel something other than anger or despair, hope. Hope wasn't just about finding new employment, it was about reclaiming her identity. Over the past week, she'd realized how much of herself she'd tied to her role at the company. Without it, she felt untethered, adrift. But maybe that wasn't entirely bad. Maybe being forced to start over gave her a chance to rediscover who she was outside of spreadsheets and boardroom meetings. With this newfound clarity, Clara decided to take matters further. She reached out to old friends, rekindling relationships she'd neglected during her busy career. One lunch date turned into several, each conversation reigniting passions she'd forgotten she had. An old college roommate suggested volunteering at a nonprofit, which led to Clara joining a mentorship program for young professionals. Teaching others brought her joy in ways she hadn't anticipated, reminding her of the impact she could still make. Meanwhile, whispers of discontent began circulating within the company she'd left behind. Former colleagues confided in her via encrypted messages, sharing stories of mismanagement and declining morale. Projects stalled, clients grew frustrated, and turnover spiked. Clara listened intently, piecing together a narrative that painted a troubling picture. It seemed her departure hadn't just affected her, it had sent ripples throughout the organization. By the end of the second week, Clara found herself standing at a crossroads. Opportunities were emerging, yes, but none felt quite right. Something bigger called to her, something she couldn't quite name yet. All she knew was that she wasn't ready to fade quietly into obscurity. Whatever came next, it would demand everything she had, and she was more than willing to give it. As Clara navigated her new reality, the cracks within the company she'd left behind widened into chasms. The absence of her steady hand and seasoned judgment became glaringly apparent almost immediately. Projects she had overseen with precision began to falter. Deadlines slipped, client complaints mounted, and internal disputes flared unchecked. Mr. Carter, once so quick with platitudes during performance reviews, found himself besieged by crises he hadn't anticipated. His decision to cut costs by eliminating senior staff suddenly seemed short-sighted, even reckless. Inside the office walls, murmurs of discontent grew louder. Younger employees, who had relied on Clara's guidance and institutional knowledge, felt abandoned. They struggled to fill the void she left, their inexperience showing in costly mistakes and missed opportunities. Morale plummeted as trust eroded. The tight-knit team dynamic Clara had cultivated over decades unraveled, leaving behind a fragmented workforce operating in survival mode. Financial repercussions soon followed. Key accounts, nurtured meticulously by Clara, began slipping away. Clients accustomed to her personalized attention and strategic insights sought alternatives elsewhere. Revenue projections tumbled, forcing the company to implement emergency cost-cutting measures. Ironically, these measures included freezing salaries and reducing benefits, moves that further alienated remaining employees already disillusioned by Clara's abrupt dismissal. Word of the turmoil spread beyond the confines of the office. Industry insiders whispered about the company's instability, tarnishing its reputation. Competitors seized the opportunity, poaching top talent and capitalizing on weakened client relationships. What started as a calculated attempt to trim expenses spiraled into a full-blown existential crisis for the firm. For Clara, watching from afar, the unfolding chaos stirred mixed emotions. Satisfaction mingled with sadness as she saw colleagues she cared about grappling with the fallout. Yet there was also validation, a confirmation that her contributions had indeed mattered, perhaps more than anyone had acknowledged while she was still employed. This realization fueled her determination to forge a new path, one that leveraged her experience without tethering her to a toxic environment. Determined to turn adversity into advantage, Clara embarked on a bold venture. Drawing inspiration from the mentorship program she joined, she conceived an idea, a consultancy aimed at helping businesses retain and maximize the value of their senior employees. She envisioned workshops, seminars, and personalized coaching sessions designed to bridge generational gaps and foster collaborative workplaces. Her own painful exit provided fertile ground for understanding the systemic issues plaguing modern corporations. To fund her startup, Clara dipped into her modest savings, supplementing it with freelance gigs she secured through networking efforts. Each project bolstered her confidence and expanded her reach. Soon, word of her expertise spread organically, attracting interest from organizations eager to learn from her experiences. Requests for speaking engagements poured in, offering platforms to share her story and advocate for workplace inclusivity across age demographics. Simultaneously, Clara pursued legal avenues to address her wrongful termination. With guidance from a trusted attorney, she filed a discrimination lawsuit against her former employer, citing age bias as the primary motive for her dismissal. Though daunting, the process empowered her, transforming private grievances into public advocacy. Media outlets picked up the story, amplifying her voice and shining a spotlight on pervasive ageism in corporate America. Through it all, Clara maintained a delicate balance between personal healing and professional reinvention. Therapy sessions helped her process lingering emotions, while journaling provided catharsis and clarity. She surrounded herself with supportive friends and mentors, leaning on their encouragement during moments of doubt. Slowly but surely, she rebuilt not just her career but her sense of self-worth. Back at the beleaguered company, the situation deteriorated further. Financial losses mounted, reaching staggering figures. By month 6 post-Clara, cumulative damages exceeded $4.8 million, a figure that continued climbing with each passing day. Desperate to salvage what remained, executives scrambled to implement damage control strategies, many of which mirrored initiatives Clara herself had championed years prior. Their belated efforts underscored the depth of their regret, though publicly admitting fault remained elusive. Internally, resentment simmered among staff. Those who stayed resented the lack of transparency surrounding Clara's departure, viewing it as symptomatic of broader leadership failures. Trust deficits hindered collaboration, exacerbating operational inefficiencies. Turnover rates soared, draining resources needed to stabilize the ship. Even Mr. Carter, insulated for so long by layers of bureaucracy, faced mounting pressure from shareholders demanding accountability. Externally, the company's tarnished image proved difficult to repair. Negative press coverage overshadowed any positive strides made in addressing internal shortcomings. Prospective clients hesitated to engage, wary of partnering with an entity perceived as unstable. Competitors capitalized ruthlessly, securing lucrative contracts and solidifying market dominance. The domino effect of Clara's firing rippled outward, impacting stakeholders far removed from initial decisions made in sterile boardrooms. Against this backdrop of corporate upheaval, Clara's star continued rising. Her consultancy gained traction, earning accolades for innovative approaches to intergenerational workforce dynamics. Testimonials poured in from satisfied clients, praising her ability to transform tense environments into cohesive teams. Speaking engagements multiplied, taking her to conferences nationwide where audiences hung on her every word. Her message resonated deeply, particularly among older workers navigating similar challenges. Yet, despite burgeoning success, Clara remained acutely aware of unfinished business. The lawsuit loomed large, its outcome uncertain but potentially transformative. Beyond monetary compensation, she sought vindication, a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing that might spark broader conversations around age discrimination. For Clara, this battle transcended personal grievances. It represented a chance to effect meaningful change, ensuring others wouldn't endure similar injustices silently. As months turned into a year, Clara's dual pursuits converged unexpectedly. A major corporation embroiled in its own age bias scandal approached her consultancy seeking guidance. Recognizing an opportunity, Clara accepted, channeling insights gleaned from her ordeal into actionable solutions tailored to their specific needs. Success there opened doors to additional high-profile clients, cementing her status as a leading authority on age diversity in the workplace. Meanwhile, legal proceedings advanced steadily. Depositions revealed damning evidence of discriminatory practices, bolstering Clara's case significantly. Settlement discussions commenced, though terms remained undisclosed. Speculation ran rampant among industry watchers, many predicting a landmark verdict capable of reshaping corporate policies nationwide. Whether through court ruling or negotiated agreement, resolution appeared imminent. Throughout this whirlwind journey, Clara never lost sight of her ultimate goal, creating a world where age didn't dictate opportunity. Her resilience inspired countless others to challenge stereotypes and demand equitable treatment. Stories of triumph emerged from shadows cast by fear, fueling a movement larger than any single individual. And at the center of it all stood Clara, undaunted, unwavering, and unapologetically herself. Even as Clara's star rose higher, casting light on the injustices faced by older workers, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her story wasn't fully resolved. Yes, her consulting business thrived, and yes, the lawsuit against her former employer seemed poised to deliver justice, but something deeper gnawed at her. It wasn't just about retribution or vindication anymore, it was about legacy. She wanted to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate she had endured, discarded because of their age, reduced to a line item on a budget sheet. This drive pushed her to think bigger. While her workshops and seminars were making waves, Clara realized they weren't enough to dismantle the entrenched biases woven into corporate culture. Change required more than education, it demanded systemic reform. Inspired by grassroots movements she'd encountered during her advocacy work, Clara began crafting a blueprint for legislation aimed at protecting older workers from discriminatory practices. She envisioned laws mandating transparency in hiring and firing decisions, requiring companies to justify terminations tied to cost-cutting measures like insurance premiums. Such policies could hold employers accountable and create safer spaces for employees of all ages. But drafting policy proposals was only half the battle. To gain traction, Clara knew she needed allies, powerful ones. Leveraging her growing network of contacts, she reached out to influential figures across industries, CEOs committed to diversity, labor union leaders advocating for worker rights, and politicians sympathetic to eldercare issues. One pivotal meeting took place over coffee with Senator Margaret Hayes, a longtime champion of workplace equality. Hayes listened intently as Clara outlined her vision, nodding thoughtfully before promising to introduce a bill addressing age discrimination in the upcoming legislative session. The senator's endorsement marked a turning point. Suddenly, Clara found herself thrust onto national stages, testifying before congressional committees and appearing on major news networks. Her testimony was raw and unflinching, recounting not just her own dismissal but the cascading effects it had on her former company and colleagues. "When you push experienced workers out the door," she declared during one televised interview, "you don't just lose individuals, you lose institutional memory, leadership, and stability. You weaken the very foundation your business rests upon." Her words struck a chord, sparking widespread debate about ageism in the workplace. Social media lit up with hashtags like #AgeIsAnAsset and #RespectExperience, drawing attention to stories of older workers facing similar struggles. Grassroots organizations rallied behind Clara's cause, organizing protests outside corporate headquarters and petitioning lawmakers to act. Momentum built rapidly, culminating in a coalition of activists, academics, and policymakers convening to draft comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation. Back at her former company, the situation continued deteriorating. Losses surpassed $6 million, prompting drastic measures. Executives attempted to lure back key clients and stem the tide of departing employees, but trust once broken proved difficult to restore. Internal audits revealed systemic flaws exacerbated by short-sighted decisions, including Clara's firing. Reports surfaced of panicked meetings where executives scrambled to reverse course, implementing initiatives eerily reminiscent of those Clara had championed years ago. Yet, without her guiding presence, execution faltered, compounding existing problems. Publicly, however, the company doubled down on denial. Official statements dismissed allegations of age bias as baseless, attributing financial woes to market fluctuations rather than poor management choices. Privately, though, cracks showed. Whistleblowers leaked damning emails detailing explicit discussions about cutting costs by targeting senior staff. These revelations fueled ongoing litigation, strengthening Clara's case exponentially. Settlement talks intensified, with her legal team pushing for not only monetary compensation but also binding commitments to implement age-inclusive policies moving forward. Amidst these developments, Clara received an unexpected invitation to speak at an international conference on workplace innovation. Organizers hailed her as a trailblazer, citing her unique blend of personal experience and professional expertise. Accepting the offer, Clara prepared tirelessly, weaving together anecdotes from her journey with data-driven arguments supporting age diversity. Her keynote address electrified the audience, earning standing ovations and sparking animated discussions long after the event concluded. Encouraged by the reception, Clara expanded her outreach globally. Collaborating with international partners, she launched webinars and training modules tailored to diverse cultural contexts. Feedback poured in from participants worldwide, praising her practical advice and empathetic approach. Requests for customized programs flooded her inbox, solidifying her consultancy's global footprint. Despite these achievements, Clara remained grounded, acutely aware of the work still ahead. Drafting legislation was one thing, getting it passed quite another. Political landscapes shifted unpredictably, alliances formed and dissolved overnight. Progress often felt agonizingly slow, punctuated by setbacks that tested her resolve. Still she persevered, buoyed by the knowledge that every small victory brought them closer to lasting change. In quieter moments, Clara reflected on how far she'd come since that fateful Tuesday morning. From shock and despair to empowerment and advocacy, her journey had transformed her in ways she never imagined. She thought about her colleagues still trapped in toxic environments, fighting battles invisible to outsiders. Their courage fueled hers, reminding her why she couldn't give up. As winter approached, bringing with it shorter days and colder nights, Clara steeled herself for what lay ahead. Legal proceedings entered critical phases, legislative efforts gained momentum, and her consultancy continued expanding. Challenges loomed large, but so too did opportunities. Whatever happened next, whether triumph or tribulation, Clara stood ready. After all, she'd already proven capable of weathering storms most deemed insurmountable. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity, but Clara remained steadfast. Her relentless advocacy began to bear fruit as Senator Hayes introduced the Workplace Age Equity Act in Congress. The bill gained bipartisan support, fueled by the growing public outcry against age discrimination. Stories poured in from across the country, older workers sharing their struggles, families speaking out about loved ones pushed aside, and even younger employees expressing fears about their own futures. Clara's voice became the rallying cry for change. Back at her former company, the situation reached a breaking point. Financial losses soared past $7 million, prompting panicked executives to attempt damage control. They tried to rehire several former senior staff members, including Clara, in a desperate bid to stabilize operations. But Clara declined their offer with quiet dignity. "It's not about me anymore," she told them firmly during a brief phone call. "This is about doing what's right, for your employees, your clients, and your future." By spring, the tide had turned decisively in Clara's favor. The lawsuit concluded with a landmark settlement. Her former employer agreed to pay substantial damages while committing to implement sweeping reforms. These included mandatory anti-bias training, transparent hiring and firing practices, and the establishment of an advisory board dedicated to promoting age diversity. It was a victory not just for Clara, but for every worker who had ever been undervalued because of their age. On the legislative front, the Workplace Age Equity Act passed with overwhelming support, marking a historic step toward protecting older workers nationwide. When President Hayes signed the bill into law, Clara stood beside her, invited as a guest of honor. Cameras flashed as they embraced, capturing a moment that would be remembered for generations, a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of collective action. In the weeks that followed, Clara found herself reflecting on how far she'd come since that devastating morning when her world seemed to crumble. What began as a personal tragedy had blossomed into a movement that transcended borders and industries. Her consultancy thrived, now operating globally and empowering countless organizations to embrace age diversity. Requests for speaking engagements continued pouring in, but Clara made time to mentor young professionals and connect with others navigating similar challenges. One crisp autumn afternoon, Clara returned to the oak tree in her backyard, the same one she'd stared at during those dark early days after losing her job. This time, though, she wasn't alone. Friends, colleagues, and men gathered around her, celebrating not just her achievements but the shared progress they'd made together. Laughter filled the air as plates of food were passed around, and stories of triumph over adversity echoed through the golden leaves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Clara raised a glass. To second chances, she said softly, her voice steady and warm. And to proving that no matter your age, you're never done making an impact. Cheers erupted, and for the first time in years, Clara felt truly at peace. She had faced unimaginable loss, fought battles many deemed unwinnable, and emerged stronger than ever. Her journey wasn't perfect, it was messy, painful, and exhausting, but it was hers. And in the end, she realized something profound. Sometimes, being let go isn't the end of the story. Sometimes, it's the beginning of something extraordinary.